Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon, good evening. It's Glenn McKnight and Alfredo Calderon and Bill Juris. And as a guest, we have Ram Mohan. Uh, I've I think I've known Ram for about 10 years on and off, having a drink with him, or I don't remember if it's alcoholic or not. I don't drink anymore either. But he's a great guy. Always been very forthright and accessible. He's got a real deep knowledge of the internet and what wanted him to do. And this module is on infrastructure today, which he steeped very deep in. But for the benefit of everyone, I would like to ask him to share with us his journey, his internet journey, how he got to where he is today, because I think it could be a good a yardstick for the students in the program. So Ram, if you don't mind, if you want to introduce yourself and sort of paint the picture of how you got to where you are today.
Thank you, Glenn, Alfredo, and Bill. I really appreciate the opportunity and to speak with the students of this forum as well. So I did not expect to spend as long as I have in the critical infrastructure space, in the domain name space. And you will find this a fairly common story from most people who are in the space. Few people intentionally decided, I want to be working in the DNS, I want to be working with IP addresses. They stumbled into it and then they found intellectual satisfaction from working on it. The story really for me started with, I was an engineer. I did electrical engineering in India, and then I acquired an MBA because, in my final year, in my last year of electrical engineering, I was doing a very complicated paper on Fourier transforms with some theorems that had to be proven, literally 32 or 33 pages worth of a very complicated mathematical and algebraic and other, calculus-oriented theorem that had to be proven. I did well. I did really well in it, but I finished it, and then I thought, when am I ever going to use this? So I then thought, wrongly, it turned out, if I get myself an MBA, I will know everything there is to know about how to actually apply things because an MBA is all about application of these kinds of ideas. I did my MBA and I found out that actually what the biggest value that came out of it was understanding that you got to get really deep into a specific area and get really specialized in that area and then be so awesome at it and then figure out how to take that great depth of knowledge and ability and have that be translatable to people everywhere, right? That journey led me to to several startup companies. I helped co-found one of the first, in fact, the first internet startup company in the Philadelphia area where I'm located right now. And there was a company called Infonautics. I joined as a senior engineer there, and I helped take the company public, and I left the company as their COO. And then while I was doing the work in that company, I discovered domain names. One of the products that we were using was using domain names in a very significant way. And in addition, our service was also sending out um, opt-in based emails to over 500,000 people every morning. This was in the late 1990s. And I became intimately familiar with email delivery, with spam, with all of the issues that are associated with getting solicited and unsolicited email in your inboxes. That led me in 2000 to start up a new company called Turntide. And that was a technology that I helped invent to push back on spam, to be able to identify the source of spam, and then kill the spam where it originated. That technology was very intriguing. We started to build the company. A few of us who started the company, we started to build it up. And there was a cybersecurity company quite well known in America called Symantec that liked our technology, came and acquired our technology, acquired our company. And so for a second time, I had put myself out of a job. So I said to myself, okay, let me try again. And that led me to co-found Affilius. Now, the idea in 2001, at that point, if you wanted to get a website up, you could only get a website up in .com, .net, .org, or one of the country codes that were there, .uk or .de or things like that. And so we had this idea. We said, listen, there ought to be space for a new type of extension on the internet, a new set of websites that can actually be meaningful. And in my thinking, I thought, what are websites mostly used for? They're used to disseminate information. The websites are mostly about information. So we came up with this idea of launching a new TLD, top level domain, called .info. And that was in 2001. I helped start the company up, Affilius. We raised some money to get the company off the ground. And we launched .info. Now, info means information in 37 languages. So we thought it was pretty universal. What we did not count on was that our launch date was, in retrospect, quite fortunate and unfortunate. We launched our company on September 12, 2001, the day after 9/11.
Oh boy.
And what that meant was nobody was focused on buying domain names and websites. Nobody wanted to give money to help, fund a company, get the company going and running and things like that. It was a great lesson for us because we had a little bit of money, we had a lot of ambition, and but it just made us focus on the core, which was build a great company, build infrastructure that actually works, and have a group of people who can be trusted. So we did that, and in 2003, that led to my co-founding a new company called Public Interest Registry that had applied for and won the bid to run .org. And that was huge. At that time, it was the largest ever transition of a top-level domain, 2.4 million domain names that transitioned from VeriSign to our systems. But let me tell you, when we started to do .org, we got a real-life experience of what it means to run critical infrastructure.
Mm.
And that experience has actually led to the continued growth of the company. We have grown to become the second largest domain name registry company in the world. We're now merged with another registry company. We're now called Identity Digital. And I went from being the person who was running Affilius as the COO. I now at Identity Digital, I'm the Chief Strategy Officer. But at the root of it is a grounding in understanding of networking, technology, business, and figuring out that technology for its own sake is only interesting in a research category, and business for its own sake often is divorced from actual feasibility and actual understanding of what you should be doing right and you should not be doing right. And so that combination, that intersection, it has been the theme of much of my life, and it really fuels why I do what I do. The other part that I didn't mention, this was the corporate part. The other part that I didn't mention was on the public service side. I served on the board of ICANN for 10 years. And I helped co-found in 2001, right after 9/11, I helped found the Internet Security and Stability Committee, which is under ICANN's aegis. And I currently serve as the chair of the Security and Stability Advisory Committee for ICANN.
That's a very rich set of experiences. I really like your comment. Not everybody has these skills, but you bring the business skills, the technology skills, because both those areas speak a different language and both have a misconception necessarily of reality. And so how did you merge the two? It's almost like two different languages, and you had to sort of merge them so that there was an understanding to move it along. And I think your new role with Chief Strategy Officer, I think that sums it up, right? So how did you come to the reckoning of that merger of the completely different perspectives on things, and most important, convincing other people on what you're saying that has merit?
Great question. Look, we all believe when we become an expert in a particular area, or at least knowledgeable in a particular area, we believe that the way we're thinking has a lot of validity to it, a lot of correctness to it. And then in our training, we learn a particular framework, a particular way of thinking. So if you are in cybersecurity, you then end up using a set of acronyms. You end up using a particular language that is unique to that group. If you were a policymaker, if you ended up studying political science, for example, you study the same things, but you use a different lens for it, and therefore you use different words. You will do a lot of working on frameworks and policy measures and things like that, right? um, and then if you came at it from a business person's point of view, it's the same problem set, but you will apply again a different lens and different words. You will use words like go to market strategy. You will use words like what is the cost of acquisition, things like that, right? Now, at the end of the day, you're really solving for different problems, and different people bring different skills to it. The question is, can you explain your solutions in the language of the person who is listening to it, right? Not in the language that you know how to explain, right? If I was speaking to a group of engineers, I could spend my time speaking bits and bytes. But what I learned very early on as an engineer, what I learned was if I wanted to explain that doing a certain job, my manager would come to me and say, here is a task that has to be done. How long will it take? I would go away. I would come up with what I thought was a reasonable estimate. And I would tell the person, it'll take 3 weeks, right? And the manager, and in some cases, this is a manager who had no technical knowledge at all, but the manager would say, no way, do it in a week. It can be done in a week. I know you can do it in a week, right? And now you have an interesting situation. Somebody with skill has assessed a job to be done to take 3 weeks. Somebody with other skills has said that I don't agree with that. I know it can be done in a week. Now you have a few choices. You can resist. You can say, you don't know how this is done. Let me tell you how this is done. And I can guarantee you 9 times out of 10, if you take an approach like that, the other person is going to say, actually, you don't know how it's done. And then you end up not really solving the problem. If, on the other hand, I spend my time as an engineer saying, I understand you want it done in a week. Can you tell me which of these things that has to be done are the most important things that you got to get solved in a week? Why is a week important for you? Right? When you ask that question, why is it important? You're now opening up honest dialogue.
Mm.
And that results in the person, the business person, telling you, I have a really important presentation with an investor in a week's time. I want to say, we've already got this done. And that then lets me understand as an engineer, oh, maybe then you don't really need this whole task that you've assigned me. Maybe it's only these three things that really matter. And I can do that in a week's time, right? So, but now what you've got is a common problem solving approach. And the only way to do that is if you try to put yourself in the other person's shoes and understand their motivations. And once you understand that, then you can come back. I mean, often you'll find, Glenn, people tell you what to do when, and the response from most of us is either to do it or to resist it or some other thing that is, either compliant or hostile. But really, I think the primary thing to do when somebody asks something like that is to say, can you tell me more? Can you tell me why? Because once you understand the why, then you can figure out the what. But most people start with the what, and that I think leads to a lot of issues.
Yeah, you make a really good point. And it sounds like a simple explanation, but if you think about it a little bit, it really is the first thing one has to do because it's the rationale, right? But people, like you say, they dig deep into the what, and they get actually never get out of the what. They stay in the what because they don't see the forest because of the trees. And I think this is good wisdom for our students to think along the lines of when they dig deeper into the ecosystem, uh, why are they doing it? Is this something that compels them? Do they have do they get a thrill of being involved with this? And it's a lot of self-reflection, and I think it's really necessary to go through this exercise. Um, so if we could turn to the what for a minute. So on the infrastructure side, you were 10 years on the ICANN board. You're on the stability and security working group right now. Is there any nuance of that infrastructure, or even saying where students should start first? Because it's like a fire hose, right? It's so much content, and you can see it in our course. It's overwhelming. So how do you advise students to how to take this on without getting overwhelmed?
So, look, infrastructure is by itself a fairly large piece. And inside of that, I would suggest you focus on critical infrastructure,
Okay.
right? Because the things that we do, my company does, that I have done for all of my career here at the domain industry, has been about critical infrastructure. And what does that really mean? It's about the systems, the facilities, the assets that are vital for the functioning of society and the economy, right? So that's kind of the scope of it, right? It's infrastructure that is essential because if it is disrupted, it would impact public safety, it would impact security, health, economic stability, right? So I was sharing earlier that we're the service provider for .org, and we've been doing it since 2003. Think about this, right? There are natural disasters that happen all the time. And if you want to contribute aid to that, many people go to redcross.org, right? it's a common place to go to. If you want information about a disaster, and how to help, but also what's happening, you can go to redcross.org. We run .org. If .org itself goes down, that is 11 million, not just websites, emails, methods to get donations for the Red Cross. But also, you look at, I'll give you an example. One of the domain names that we run is a foundation that helps refugees um, come out of their countries because they are being persecuted. And this is, as you can imagine, this is not just very sensitive, but it's truly life and death.
Mhm.
The wrong information being divulged or information not being available, the site being down, email not working, a secure communications mechanism malfunctioning, could mean something really significant, right? So that kind of helps you think that your job is to be a steward, not an owner. Your job is to help make the system better, not just about how do I make more money, right? So I would say first thing is check as a student, check what is your motivation? What really drives you in the space? If the driver is to make a lot of money alone, nothing wrong with it. Everybody needs to make money. But please recognize that in the infrastructure space, often an intent to only make money means that when it comes under a pressure test, which it always will in infrastructure, you will have to make a choice somewhere along the way where you have to make a decision that will cost you money, but that will gain the world some stability or gain the environment that you're working in some stability or security. And you have to make that kind of a clear set of choice in that area. The other thing that I would say is on infrastructure, think about which area of infrastructure you want to focus on. I commonly look at, if you look at threats to critical infrastructure, I look at it as 6 areas, right? There are cyber attacks, there are physical attacks, natural disasters, pandemics and health emergencies, supply chain vulnerabilities, and technological dependencies, right? So those are, broadly speaking, 6 common threats to critical infrastructure. Pick one or two and really specialize in them. Become amazing in those areas, and you will find both intellectual satisfaction and also job security for the rest of your careers.
Indeed, I don't think we're going to have a shortage of natural disasters, uh, regardless, regardless Bill and his matches. I think it's so. You were speaking about um, cyber attacks, and I remember a couple of months ago we had the major issue. I believe it was CrowdStrike. Was
Mhm.
was they did what was the essence of that? What was the reason behind it, or did they actually get to the bottom of where their weakness was?
So that was an interesting situation where it was a self-inflicted
Mm.
attack. It was kind of a, in soccer terms, it was a self-goal,
Oh,
right? CrowdStrike. The short form of it, Glenn, is poor quality control.
okay.
Um, they introduced a change in the configuration of their systems, and they figured it's only a config change. It's not actually software. So they didn't put it through the same level of rigorous testing that these things usually are subjected to, and they released it out in the wild. Now, the CrowdStrike software safeguards computers at the very foundational, at the root level of the operating system. So it is embedded deep in the operating system. When the configuration change was made, it was a bad configuration and it triggered the crashes. And once the computer started crashing, when the computer tried to restart, it encountered that same tripwire and it did it over and over again. And the only way to solve it was to actually go in, stop it manually, and delete the files that were misconfigured. And the moment you deleted the files, everything worked fine. So it wasn't that the software was deficient, but the packaging of the software was bad. I mean, the real world analogy to this is the milk in a container is very good, but the lid of it is not screwed on right.
Sure.
And so the milk spoils. It wasn't that the milk was bad. It wasn't that the container was bad, but somebody did not actually check that the lid was screwed on tight.
Yeah, I would say that that's indicative of a more widespread problem, which is some things are core to the business and some things are regarded as overhead. Quality assurance is overhead. And so there's a motivation from the business side often to say, well, let's cut down on how much effort we're putting into this because it's overhead and we need to cut our overheads. And that's fine right up until the first time that you get something like CrowdStrike got, where your lack of QA just crashed your business side. And then everybody goes, oh, whoops, there was a reason why we were spending money and effort on that overhead. But that's that can be a little late for your business, and your customers may well be going, I think we better go do business with somebody who's got their act together. So that's something I would say all of the students need to take into their future careers is, if it's overhead, there probably is a reason why you're doing that. And maybe you dig in and find, well, no, there isn't. It's just because we've always done it and it's now irrelevant. But quite possibly you find, oh, wait, we did that for a reason and we stopped doing that at our peril. And that, I mean, quality assurance is one part, but there are other things you do in the course of getting whatever your product is done and rolled out and sold. And better not forget basically the infrastructure behind putting everything together.
Right. Yeah, I think those are really strong points. For students, the thing to recognize is, even in organizations that make a commitment to quality assurance and getting things right, in infrastructure and anything that is operational in the computer realm, there really is not such a thing as zero defects. So you will have to anticipate that something major will go wrong. And in my experience, the real measure of an organization, of the company you work for or the organization you work for, is not so much in, do they get it right all the time? It is much more in, when they get it wrong, do they get it fixed right? Do they make sure it doesn't happen again? Do they put processes and policies in place? And do they make an investment in making sure that that kind of problem doesn't happen again? So when you pick a career and when you pick an organization to go and work for, make sure that the values of that organization, especially in the infrastructure space, are values that are driven by resilience rather than safety. If you have an organization that tells you we will keep you safe, you ought to really be skeptical about it because it's very hard to be safe online. But you can be safer online. But to actually be truly safe is a very hard thing. So focus on resilience, focus on organizations that have a culture that is about learning from mistakes and learning to make sure that they don't repeat the same mistakes the next time over.
Yeah, as an engineer, you probably in your learnings you came across something called fail reports, where you actually deliberately go through scenarios of actually seeing how things actually could fail. Where is the weak point? And so I think that's part of what you're saying as well.
Absolutely. Look, one of the most important pieces of learning when you're running and managing critical infrastructure is when it failed due to your actions, due to somebody else's actions, uh, to have a proper postmortem on it, to actually go and say what failed, why did it fail, how can we make sure it doesn't happen again? You know, when the war in Ukraine broke out a few years ago, inside of our organization, that was one of the biggest things that we did was we said, oh, critical infrastructure was the first thing that got attacked.
Yep.
It was not buildings, it was not people getting killed, it was banks and internet service providers and domain name systems. Those were the things that first got attacked. And for us, it led to building a set of scenarios to say, what are we prepared? If something like this happened, what is the playbook? What are the first 5 steps you must take? Who are the first 10 people you must contact? Do you already have a channel set up for them? So those are foundational things that you have to think about and you have to plan on. So those failed reports and the scenario planning is essential. Look, the reality is this: when you are working on critical infrastructure, when critical infrastructure fails, you have no time to plan. You have no time to think. You only have time to act. Because it is critical infrastructure, every minute that it stays down, it's causing a problem for society, for health, for economy, things like that, right? So you really have a responsibility to think well ahead. When times are good, you make plans for what might happen, what you might do when times are bad. And then when those times come, you execute on those plans.
So I'm just thinking, because most organizations, or even the educational process, there's a concept of excellence, and everything is to hide the vulnerabilities, to hide the incompetencies that's within an organization, and always say to the shareholders, we're doing great. There's no
Yep.
cyber attacks. The staff's all happy. We have the best system of the best. So it's an illusion that happens, and so I'm not picking on CrowdStrike, but this is something that's inherently with all organizations. They live an illusion to a degree, and to rise above that illusion and say, well, we have to be introspective. We have to be not just giving an image of excellence. We actually have to walk the walk.
Yeah, it's so true. I have so much resonance with what you're saying, Glenn. This is also inherent in human nature. As children, we find, when we mess up, we don't want to tell our parents because we worry that we're going to get punished or admonished in some way. So we try to hide it. And then if we get away with it, we then learn to do more of it, right? It's really bad for us as humans. But that fundamental human nature is reflected in our institutions and in the systems that we have. So it is human nature to always want to look good. It is human nature to always present this perfect image of how things are going. And the reality is that the best collaboration and the best assistance from other people and other organizations come when you are honest about the vulnerabilities, when you're honest about, hey, we don't know what's going on in this area. Can you help? Right? But as a society, we have trained ourselves, unfortunately, to not say, I don't know,
Hmm.
to not have organizations say, we messed up. Those things, culturally, societally, we don't have that kind of a model, but we really ought to build that kind of a model. One of the good things about critical infrastructure is that you're almost always naked to the world. It's very hard to hide a mistake that you make or that your organization has made online because there are other people who can see it, observe it, watch it. And if you lie about it, they can see that too, right? So, in a good way, the infrastructure space is one where the winners and the losers are decided not by how great the marketing spin is, but it's decided by how great the operating capacity is.
That's an excellent point. So I think it gets down to transparency.
It
So
does.
so if you're doing a great job and the it's out there, it's in everybody's space, uh, good, the bad, and the ugly, uh, and that community that's out there, if you're screwing up, they're going to tell you, right? Not always telling you when you do a great job, because that's how we are as human nature. But if we screw up, man, people are down your throat, right?
Totally.
Yeah, yeah.
Totally. And the important thing when people are down your throat is to get a little bit of distance from that and recognize the value of the comments and remove the personal attack nature of it, right? Because people, you will feel attacked and it will make you feel defensive. It'll make organizations feel defensive. But organizations really are a reflection of the people inside of them, right? So when you do get very strong criticism, especially when it's for something that you didn't do wrong, but you get criticized for it anyway, there's a great deal of learning to come from that.
Yeah, you get your stripes, I guess. You know, you your father takes you to the back shed with a willow stick and
Yep.
gives you a wallop.
Yep.
I'm going to turn to Alfredo. Alfredo, go ahead.
Sure. Ram, going back to the critical infrastructure that you mentioned and and the different situations where some crashes or malware has been embedded within an upgrade. I was wondering, what's your reflection on the emerging technologies, quantum computing and artificial intelligence as resources
Good.
to avoid those critical infrastructure failures and so forth?
Um, Thank you. It's a great question. So I think on critical infrastructure failures, there are really two or three good practices to have. The first is that you have to understand that the entire task is about managing risk. It's not about managing technology. It's about managing risk. And in some cases, you might have to make a choice to let a small scale problem continue to be out there on the internet because taking it down to fix that small problem might result in a much larger issue. So it's how much risk are you willing to take versus the level of outcome reward that comes from it. So that's one factor. The other thing is AI has tremendous potential. AI has the ability, because it has the language models inside of it, the data science models inside of it, it can see the patterns and it can come back to say what patterns are most likely to happen for a given situation and then protect against it. And Alfredo, those kinds of things can be automated. Those kinds of things, the AI system can be integrated into your test cycle, into your unit tests and your regression tests, and all of the various tests that you do. AI can be tremendously valuable that way. And that, I think, will reduce quite a lot of malformed code, of code that doesn't do what it's supposed to do, right? So I think AI has tremendous potential there. As far as quantum is concerned, we're still quite some ways away from having that have real world impact. For the immediate future, I don't believe that quantum computing, quantum networking is going to challenge the cryptographic pieces that underpin the public key infrastructure that runs our internet and keeps it safe and secure, right? So I don't think we got to worry about it right now, but there are groups that are focusing on building new algorithms that are quantum safe. And when that comes, when that is ready, that'll get implemented and there will be a long and a big effort for it. But I'm not too worried about quantum systems themselves right now. I think we ought to be looking at smaller, straightforward things we can do. One of the biggest things, Alfredo, that we don't pay enough attention to is the human factor. The largest number of errors that happen, the largest number of mistakes that happen are innocent. They are people who weren't trained sufficiently, who were too tired and made a decision while they were tired, who didn't think through the downstream effects and the side effects of a change that they were making. So I think in our educational model, we have to train our engineers, our managers, our policymakers to think beyond just the problem set that they're working on and to think about downstream effects as well as upstream effects. And regrettably, our educational models do not provide much guidance in that.
It really gets back to managers having the skills to allow people to make mistakes and to learn from them. If you have a boss who will basically fire you on the spot because you've made an error, it's a real problem with an organization that's not understanding. Like you said, it's going to happen. It's not if it's going to happen. It's going to happen. It's when it's going to happen, and how you respond to those errors and rectify it, and working with your staff. It's a lesson learned. It's very critical.
So
Go ahead.
Ram, if I may, could you talk a little bit or speak a little bit on where can students engage to learn more about these topics we're talking about, so that they can, if they are still university students, can better prepare to encounter these situations?
Sure. When it comes to risk management, I would recommend that students look at several well-established cyber risk frameworks that are out there. One of the most used ones, the one that I like quite a lot, is the risk framework, the cyber risk framework that NIST, the National Institute of Science and Technology, what they have put out. That's an excellent framework. That's worth learning, worth understanding, because there is a great deal of knowledge and wisdom that has gone into it. But it's very practical and applicable. It is not just theoretical, right? So that's on the risk management side of it. I would recommend that. On the human factors piece of critical infrastructure management, I think the biggest thing you really want to do there is find connections with actual practitioners, people who are actually running critical infrastructure or infrastructure today. They will tell you far more than you will read from a book, far more from from watching a video or listening to a podcast. That one-on-one interaction, when you go to a conference, when you go to a meeting and you connect with them. And let me tell you also, you don't have to wait for a conference or a meeting. You can find information about them and you can send them an email. Most of us in these roles are delighted to speak with students and share what we've learned. So I would say that's the other thing for students to do.
Okay. So one of the things you mentioned, and I remember a couple of years ago, I think it was 2023, Eurodig did it, but also RIPE NCC had a whole series of workshops and where people actually got into trucks, drove all the way across Germany, all across Poland with infrastructure. Because
Yep.
as you said earlier, that was the first thing they hit. But we're seeing in the US some real serious attacks on the political system. And they keep referring to Russian agents. They're undermining the integrity of the political system. So, is this a whole new element? And the thing about the Ukrainian war, it really is a great test bed to say, how can we prepare for something? Because we have a concrete example, but the American one, and I think it's happening. I think there's allegations of Chinese interference with the Canadian election as well. So is there any lessons learned in these international movements, geopolitical stuff?
Great question, complicated question.
Mm-hmm.
And it's complicated even further by the rise of AI. Because pre-AI GPT, Glenn, my answer to you would have been check the source,
Yeah.
check your information, refer online, and that'll give you a good idea about whether this information is truthful or not, reliable or not. But with GPT engines being around and deployed for bad purposes, it's a more challenging environment, right? Because you have the ability to invent images that don't exist. You have the ability to create a video of somebody saying things that they have never said and make it look like it is them because of the deep fakes that are out there, right? So I think in a situation like this, I'm not sure that we're going to have a new technology that solves the problem. Underneath this, I believe, is you need to have a society that says we actually value the truth and we want the truth. And when you have a social model where you have people saying the truth is what I tell you it is, or the truth is what the truth from another side is actually not the truth. The truth from me is the only truth. Now you're actually eroding what truth itself is, right? So I think we have a societal issue to solve there. The technology piece is we can create tools that do fact checking. We can create tools that establish whether something is a real video or a deepfake video. There are tools, they already exist. But the narratives that are in our political discourse, in our social discourse, not just political, but social discourse, uh, is has become much more of an echo chamber and much less of respectful dialogue and discourse among parties who may have opposing points of view or differing points of view, and then you learn from the other side, right? But I think we are in an era where there is a great deal of value in finding technologies that can amplify your signal. It's about it. This is the era of signal boosting, not an era of signal, attenuation and getting to the right signal strength to make sure that you actually have signal being passed through and not noise, right? But you're now in an era where it's completely just boosting the signal, and if that signal is all noise, that's all the recipient hears.
Yeah, I can't remember who said it. I think it may have been Mark Twain. It's easy to convince someone on a lie. It's extremely difficult to undo that lie. So we have I'm not really sure how any of the educational process, because we see it all the time. We see people going to Trump rallies, and people are rational. They give them facts, and they don't want to hear about these facts. They don't want to hear about any other alternative reality. They have a fixed idea. And when you were saying about AI images, I put it in the chat. There's images of former Donald Trump walking through the water carrying cats, rescuing cats in the hurricane. And people believe this stuff. It's comical, but that's the power of what's happening. And I think that's what Alfredo's getting at too. It's going to be extremely, I don't think we've ever seen this level of manipulation that has been in history.
And I think that this is why I'm saying we have to solve some of the social issues. The technology is going to enable whatever the social instincts are, right? I mean, the most innovative use of the internet in its early days were adult sites, right? And there was a social imperative that helped drive that innovation that happened in that area, right? So I would say if we end up saying, adult sites are bad, that was not the problem to solve. Banning adult sites was not going to solve the foundational social issues, right? We see this with governments that have a desire to control the DNS and filter the DNS and sometimes shut down the DNS if they find dissent. And it's the wrong instinct because you actually want to have information continue to flow. Of course, it's inconvenient for those who are in power who may be doing something that is not right. But I think for us as a society, we ought to really work hard to try and preserve that level of open information flow and have some bastions of credibility and truthfulness. I mean, this is the reason why Wikipedia, as an example, is far more accurate than any other encyclopedia in the world, right? And the primary reason is if somebody goes and manipulates Wikipedia and puts something totally wrong, the mean time for that to be corrected is way faster because there's a whole bunch of other people who can go in and correct it, right? So now that's a social construct that seems to be working, right? Question is, are there other social constructs like that that we can build that help with this era of disinformation and propaganda?
Indeed. Great. I'm going to turn over to Alfredo. Do you have a final question or a comment for Ram?
Yeah, sure, Ram. One of the key messages that I see through our conversation is education. Education is key, and we have to start with the young people that we have taking the course and other cohorts as we move forward. Uh, so basically, I look forward to having you on board with us, with Glenn and myself and Bill, to help us out refine the infrastructure module so that we can show them the actual ideas that you're bringing to the table, which are great. And I just learned a couple of new things that I didn't know about, and I'm going to share that with my hopefully future mentees in the next gen and fellowship program in ICANN. So thank you for that. Back to you, Glenn.
You can
Great.
count on me.
Great. We'll send you an ID and password for you to review the content as well. So this has been great. Thank you so much. I used to be a PIR advisory committee member and ISOC board member in my past. So we've always crossed paths, if not with you, with Desiree, and it's always been an enjoyable relationship. So we look forward to seeing you. Bill will be there and myself will be in Istanbul. So I hope you'll be there as well.
I will be there. That's fantastic. And again, as before, the SSAC has many meetings and most of them are open. So I look forward to seeing you there. And Glenn, I'm also at Istanbul. I'm starting up a new initiative. It's called the Coalition for Digital Inclusion, CODI. And I'll provide a little bit more details, but that's about this recognition that we are now at a moment in time where it's not just enough to connect the unconnected. Once they're connected, how do you make their connection meaningful, and how do you include them in the digital world? We're all digital natives. How do you bring them along? And the specific focus of this coalition I'm helping build is on language, because language is a big divider today. So we want to help organizations that are working on digital inclusion learn how to bring language as a pillar to improve digital inclusion. So more details to come.
Well, looking forward to it. Again, thank you so much for your time. The hour went fast, but we always appreciate your time and knowledge. And I'll send you the recording as soon as it gets compiled. So again, thank you again, and looking forward to seeing you. Okay,
thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you. That concludes the call today. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Ram.
Thank you, Ram.
Of course. Bye.
Bye, everybody.